Sherry's sister died. Yesterday, not yesterday morning. Anyway, I don't know if she'll be back to offer Qigong or not, but we'll have outside walking meditation if she's not able to do Qigong with us. Tassajara Sangha Week is coming up in July. We have a couple of openings. Please let us know if you'd like to come. Starting in July, Sangha members are going to be giving way-seeking mind talks, which is always interesting and fun. Probably not for them because they get scared, but maybe not. But looking forward to that. And so we've been studying the Vimilakirti Sutra, and I thought I would do a little I was thinking, oh, I'll do a little history of Buddhism, and really just hope and pray there's no Buddhist scholars that ever listen. Do fact check, but it's my own little, good enough. So the Buddha was, there was no Buddhism in the time of Buddha because Buddha was just the Buddha. And Buddha noticed, as the story goes, that there was suffering in the world and wanted to wake up and alleviate suffering. And long story, long path, sat down underneath the Bodhi tree and vowed not to get up until he woke up, understood, penetrated this life and how to help people. And when he woke up, he was called the Awakened One. And when he sat down, the earth touching mudra he touched the earth. He made the vow that he was going to sit there and wanted to awaken. And the story, and actually there are ancient, this isn't just me making this up, although I think it's a great story, is because there's actually ancient pictures that you might even be able to see in the Asian Art Museum if you want. I think I've seen it there in the San Francisco one. That the goddess from the earth came up and met his hand and affirmed his place along with everyone and everything on the earth. So in a certain way, this is an earth-based tradition. And the story is that I love the description, is that when their hands met, the earth shook like a joyful woman. And so I'm telling you that because soon in the Vimilakirti, not today, but I'm doing a preview starting on Thursday and on Sunday at the sitting. There's a goddess who appears in the Vimilakirti Sutra, which is totally, I think, totally cool. She's been living in Vimilakirti's room, they say, for 12 years and for a long, long time. And just by way of preview, Thich Nhat Hanh, whose commentary I'm using, talks about her a little bit. Joan Sutherland's commentary that I'm using talks about her a lot. So I'm going to use her commentary because I think it's a fun aspect of this sutra. So going back to, so the Buddha, Buddhism was not codified. Buddha taught in each situation. He just met whoever he met and met them and gave the appropriate teaching to try to help. After the Buddha died, as often happens, things became more codified and more monastic, more institutionalized, which is often what happens to religions, that they get more religious. When in fact they were always just there to sort of help. They were alive. And so at a certain point, 2,000 years ago, we're now moving forward a little bit, a movement began of lay people who said, more or less, we think you monastics are great, and we're really glad that you're practicing for us, and we're really glad that we can support you. but we'd really like a piece of this pie too. We'd like to be able to wake up and practice ourselves. And so there was this whole, the Vimilakirti Sutra is part of that, one might say reclaiming it and bringing it back to earth and back to ground and back to everyday life. Vimilakirti is clearly a layperson. And part of what, and you'll see, I think as I go into this more today, part of what happened was monastic, and when it became more a monastic institutionalized, I mean, which is beautiful, and that still goes on today, and monastics are wonderful. But there was in early Buddhism a real feeling that the earth was not a great place to be. And so it was mostly how do we purify ourselves? How do we get out of this messy world? Vimalakirti's teaching and the sutra is very much, it's in the world, it's of the world. This is it. There's no place else to get to. And in fact, Joan Sutherland, as we've been noticing, enlightenment can have the feeling of transcendence. She talks about endarkenment, which is coming down into the body and down into feelings and down into being alive with and for all beings here. So we are at the place. So the other part of this is because it was trying to be popularized, these sutras were put on more like plays. They were put out, they were done the way a movie would be these days to get people interested. And so there are kind of different scenes. When we move into the goddess scene, there'll be a scene change a little bit because the goddess will pop up, and I'll tell you one of the cool things about the goddess is that she can change sex. She can change from a woman into a man and back again. So we've got some pretty interesting stuff coming up here. But for now, we've been in the room we're in Vimilakirti's sick room. And he says he's on a bed in an empty room, and multitudes of, this is to let us know that we're not in linear time and space. There are, I think, 32,000 bodhisattvas and 8,000 disciples and practitioners. They're all crammed in this little 10 by 10 room. And there's a dialogue that's going on between Vimalakirti and Manjushri, who's a bodhisattva of wisdom, who can cut through. One of the other names of the sutra is the reconciliation of dualities. Manjushri usually carries a sword and is able to cut through setting one thing up against the other thing. And Shariputra, who is, I'm giving you the cast. Play. I'm giving you the program here. Shariputra is one of the Buddha's most noted and wise disciples. But in these sutras weren't always kind because they kind of make him a fall guy. So they let him ask all kinds of dumb questions. And then, of course, Vimalakirti, but because Shariputra was a monastic, Vimilakirti, who's a lay person, gets to be the wise person and say, oh, Shariputra, that's it, but that's not quite it. So where we are, the fundamental question always is how do we be here? How do we live in this life? How do we, if we're being told that the source of suffering is seeing things in duality, of setting one thing up against the other, you against me, right against wrong, this over there, but it's completely how we're hardwired because we're human beings. That's how our brains work. That's how our eyes perceive. How do we how do we reconcile that with the fact that we're also simultaneously being told that what the Buddha woke up to was that everything is radically interconnected and flowing in and out of everything else. So we've got two different points of view here, one would say, and our brain wants to pick one or the other. So we want to transcend and get out of here because it's too messy and we'd really like this to be pure, and maybe we can get rid of all of our confused states of mind and our anger and all that yucky stuff of being human, and maybe we really can attain something like enlightenment and kind of walk around as pure human beings. Sounds nice, huh? Maybe. So what we're being taught in this part of the sutra is something called the middle way. The middle way being, one might, is the equivalent of what in Zen Buddhism and in the Prajnaparamita Sutras is called emptiness. The Prajnaparamita Sutras are have the Tibetan is also Mahayana, so it has the same root teachings. So the middle way is the teaching between the extremes. Is if you think this is just a pure land that you can transcend out of, that's called eternalism. That there's a thing that wait a minute, let me get this right. Okay, let me back up again. The three main teachings the Buddha woke up to, that Vimilakirti is helping people wake up to in this little room, is everything is impermanent. You can't nail it down and turn it into this or that. There is no permanent self. It's a complete illusion that you think you are, that Beth is Beth, that will always eternally be Beth with all of her same problems, with all of her, whatever we do in terms of how we solidify into ourselves. And the third one is, as Thich Nhat Hanh says, he calls it nirvana, which is, it is possible to wake up in this world and to live peacefully. If you go too far one way, you move into eternalism. It's not working. Let me go to the guardian. All dharmas that arise from causes and conditions. So everything, if you're in the earth realm, everything happens because something else happened. And if this happens, that happens. If that doesn't happen, this doesn't happen. And so that's the way we believe life happens. But from the point of view of impermanence and emptiness, it's not linear that way. The world is vast and open. Everything is conditioning each moment. And the minute you try to grab hold of it, it slips between your fingers. You can't hold on to it. So once you call something something, it's called a designation. And once you name it, you've turned it into something. But when you know that it's just a designation, that you just called it something, but you just trapped it in that moment and you're holding on tight to it, and you can let go of that moment after moment, then that's called the middle way. Is this making sense? You following? The middle way goes right down the middle. You can't say it's empty, completely empty, and that's called nihilism. And you can't say it's completely solidified, because that's called suffering, because it means nothing can change. It means nothing's alive. So the way of a bodhisattva, the way that Nagarjuna and Vimilakirti are teaching us, is that the way of a bodhisattva is skillful. And skillful means the ability to make use of all of it. To make use of, you can't grab hold of any of it. To make use of the fact that we actually experience pain and it feels really, really real. To make use of, I feel like I'm solid self over here, and don't tell me that's not true. But I also know that I'm not as that there's a fluid energy and aliveness to who I call Chris. And that all of this is the path of awakening. You can't take any of it or throw any of it out. You need all of it. So let me read you something from Thich Nhat Hanh here. To be in the world of birth and death and not to be made impure by it is the middle way. To dwell in nirvana or peacefulness, but not to withdraw into the world of emptiness or nihilism is the practice of a bodhisattva. Nirvana, waking up, is here in the world of birth and death. We can dwell peacefully here and not need to run away to another realm. That's the way of the bodhisattva. And what we experience then is inconceivable liberation. So inconceivable imagination, inconceivable liberation is what a bodhisattva, which is what we are being asked to, along with Vimilakirti and the Buddha, to imagine, is the unimaginable. That you can't grab hold of any idea of what this world is about. And that if we use skillful means, which I'm going to help you with Vimilakirti understand, is that we can help people be liberated from so my husband and I decided to watch Ken Burns's The Civil War 1990 documentary. It's a long. It's so painful. And there was a commentary on last night where one of the historians is saying that there was something about during the Civil War where people just completely believed their side was right. And they would just, if somebody told you to just like go take a hill, and if you were using your brain, you wouldn't do it because you'd know there were going to be thousands of people dying. But they all just did it, and both sides were doing it. It's like they were completely stuck in the world of duality, because in a war mentality, and it seems like there was something particular about our Civil War, is where they just kept throwing themselves, and the death rate was incredible. Nobody could pull back from it. So that's the world of duality, but in the midst of it, there was also something there that was some belief that was bigger than the death that was happening. It's like they were doing this for God. They were doing this for God, and they were doing it for country. And so there was some kind of absolute idea that was motivated to do these, to just sacrifice themselves over and over and over again. So the question would be, Vimilakirti might say, so what do we do in these situations? Because we can find in ourselves, I know that there's a part of me that thinks I'm right politically. And I know that there are people, quote, on the other side who think they're right politically. And I also know that I'm motivated by, I mean, if I go deep enough, I get to someplace else. But I'm doing it out of some belief about purity. And I'm actually, but I also believe the other side also thinks they're doing it out of some kind of purity. It's just, we just sort of don't agree on our view of what it is we're headed for. But I don't have any doubt that everybody, everybody's doing this out of some kind of righteousness. So the question over and over again then becomes, so how do we be here in the middle of this mess? How do we be here in the middle of, there are higher or deeper principles, but how do we keep letting go of what we think is permanent me and you, and keep finding our way together to create the world that we all really want? Make sense? I mean, I think we have to keep asking that question. Otherwise, we just keep doing the same old over and over again. So here's what John Sutherland says. We're looking for a compassion that calls us to an allegiance beyond our immediate self-centered concerns. And authenticity and truth are best expressed by a cool cloth on a hot forehead in the early hours of the morning. What's being proposed here is a process for healing the human heart. It might seem strange to say that compassion is really more about what we do than about how we feel, and then to say that this is a process of healing the heart. But Vimilakirti is suggesting that we settle the desire and the longing and the passion and just be present right in the midst of all of it. We're moving towards a living, open-hearted presence in the midst of suffering. And when our orientation shifts in this way, we're beginning a process that isn't going to be fully realized at the start. First, we make a vow or an intention. It's for compassion. It's what's a way of being in this that's bigger than taking sides. And there's a commitment to that. And then we work towards responding in ways that are helpful, regardless of how you feel, to whatever extent you can. The willingness to share whatever good you have, even without complete sympathy or understanding, is full-blown compassion, because it is the good you have, and that's what full-blown means. Because it's as much as you can do, that's all of it. So in the midst of all of it, you just keep, how can I be of help? What's the deepest truth? How do I see through this? And then Vimilakirti reminds us that compassion isn't a project of the ego, focused on reaping the rewards of doing the right thing, but on sharing whatever is good in us, whatever skills and arts we have, whatever largeness we possess, however we can be helpful over and over again. The good in us belongs not to ourselves, but to the world. It is a migratory bird that for a moment has come to rest in us, which we shelter and feed and send on its way. The strategies the ego employs to wrest our attention from the work at hand and back to itself, strategies like self-righteousness, judgment, guilt, or actions like squandering our resources and depleting our energy, work against compassion, great and small. We know the troubles that self-centeredness can kick up in the midst of helpfulness and kindness. But we can also get into trouble if we tilt too far in the other direction, overriding our own capacities. Fortunately, the remedy for this is pretty simple. Include yourself in the field of your compassion. Remember that you aren't special in either direction, deserving extra or unworthy of enough. Extend the same bodhisattva's hand to yourself that you would to someone else. Encouraging, supporting, nourishing, protecting, and challenging the good in us are all part of taking care of that good, which is our lovely responsibility to do. So we start with, there's basic goodness. And how then do we keep extending ourselves from basic goodness? How do we keep coming back to basic goodness? And how do we include ourselves in that? Which is not to say, I'm going to skip myself to be good to you over there, or I'm going to supersede you because I want goodness over here. So here's the question. You aren't special in either direction. You don't deserve extra, or are you unworthy of enough? You just keep encouraging, supporting, nourishing, protecting, and challenging the good in each one of us over and over. That's the middle way. That's the way. So why don't we get into small groups and talk about what is the good in you? What is the good in you that you keep nurturing and coming back to over and over, that includes your confusion, that includes the confusion of the other? Doesn't pretend there's not delusion. It doesn't wish for some sublime world that's different than this one, but we just keep orienting on goodness over. What is that goodness? Okay, go figure it out. We've got about 10, 15 minutes.